Letter that Mary Lacy, the Boulder district attorney, wrote to John Ramsey. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, she said, I'm deeply sorry. No innocent person should have to endure such an extensive trial.
Michael Caine showed us that it is very possible for Lin Wood to lead his troops of Patsy Ramsey and John Ramsey out the front door to act important and act like something had been accomplished and straight lie. First and foremost, before we get started, gotta say thank you to a few special people. First up is going to be Trace the Ace, a 1. Thank you, Trace, for the special thanks. Really appreciate it. Second person up is, Carrie Serrano, 9818. You've seen Carrie before, so appreciate you, Carrie. And last but not least, Maine Hypnosis LLC 3294. And also note that Maine is a member of the channel, so double thank you to Maine, and thank you to everyone once again for pitching in and continuing to support me, watching videos and everything. So bring it in. Thank you. So hope you love the video, and let's go. Now, I can't guarantee that this video won't frustrate you in some way, shape, or form, but we'll see. If you haven't seen it before, this is going to be John Ramsey on the Oprah Winfrey show. And I got about 3 clips here that I want to take a look at, analyze, and see if there's anything that, we can come up with. So here we go.
Well, this summer, breaking news put John Ramsey back in the headlines. John, his late wife, Patsy, and their son, Burke, were formally exonerated by the Boulder, Colorado district attorney. She cited new DNA evidence that clears the family of any involvement in JonBenét's killing, and John Ramsey is here. Welcome.
Thank you.
What did...
Thank you.
Obviously, they told you before this, the news announcement, right?
Yes, they did.
And so when you heard that, how did it feel? Was it a hollow feeling, or?
Well, I guess first and foremost, it felt like progress.
Felt like progress.
We knew without a doubt that now we had good, solid DNA, which is really what the solution of this case is pinned on now.
And how is this DNA different than other DNA?
Well, it's not, and that's the good news. There was DNA. We knew there was DNA all along. The police didn't really pay attention to it. When the district attorney took the case over, they did pay attention to it, extracted some samples from some of JonBenét's clothing that gave them enough to put in the database. What this new testing did was, and it's a kind of a new technology called touch DNA, they found more of the same DNA in other parts of her clothing, and so it just was overwhelmingly conclusive that this was indeed the killer's DNA.
Wow. This is part of the letter that Mary Lacy, the Boulder district attorney, wrote to John Ramsey. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, she said, I'm deeply sorry. No innocent person should have to endure such an extensive trial in the...
I guess I was trying to get him, or wait for him to explain.
Overwhelmingly conclusive that this was indeed the killer's DNA.
Wow.
This is of the same DNA in other parts of her clothing. And it's a kind of a new technology called touch DNA. They extracted some samples from some of JonBenét's clothing that gave them enough to put in the database. What this new testing did was, and it's a kind of a new technology called touch DNA, they found more of the same DNA in other parts of her clothing, and so it just was overwhelmingly conclusive that this was indeed the killer's DNA.
Wow. This is part of the letter that Mary Lacy, the Boulder district attorney, wrote to John Ramsey. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, she said, I'm deeply sorry. No innocent person should have to endure such.
I'm confused. The statement that he made about the DNA at first. I guess that's where I'm getting confused. The statement that he made about the DNA at first. Oprah asked him what's different about the DNA. He said nothing. But I guess what he's going on to say is that this is the same DNA, but now the DA has just decided to test it. And this is in 2008 when he's saying this. So it's not different. It's just they decided to test it. And with the new method of touch DNA, they were able to exonerate us with a lot, in regards to a lot of other people.
Is it a hollow feeling or?
Well, I guess first and foremost, it felt like progress
Felt like
because
progress.
we knew without a doubt that now we had good, solid DNA, which is really what the solution of this case is pinned on now.
And how is this DNA different than other DNA?
Well, it's not, and that's the good news. There was DNA. We knew there was DNA all along. The police didn't really pay attention to it.
And how is this DNA different than other DNA?
Well, it's not, and that's the good news. That now we had good, solid DNA, which is really what the solution of this case is pinned on now.
And how is this DNA different than other DNA?
Well, it's not, and that's the good news. There was DNA. We knew there was DNA all along. The police didn't really pay attention to it. When the district attorney took the case over, they did pay attention to it, extracted some samples.
Guys, let's correct me if I'm wrong. Let's take a step back here. To me, as I understand the case, there is a glaring fundamental error that John is speaking about right now. He said when the DA took over the case, number one, what he's saying is to imply that when the DA took over the case, they removed it from the hands of the police department. And he seems to indicate it that this happened rather recently. So the first thing, DA took the case recently. Secondly, he is implying that the DA obtained physical DNA evidence. And the third thing is that the DA tested the evidence, which is something that the police have not done before. Godly. Have not done before. The fundamental misguiding that is happening here, and this is why I do this, the fundamental misguiding that is happening here is really a system of checks and balances. If you understand the system of checks and balances that we've talked about and you listen very closely, you will understand that what John just said about, very subtly, what John just said about the DA taking over the case, that ain't how it works. It don't work that way at all. The DA's job is to prosecute. The DA is not going to take, that's it. The DA's job, now, when we talk about checks and balances, the police department's job is to go find all of the evidence. That's what they do. So from a very foundational level, what John is trying to suggest here is that the case moved from the police department and the police turned over all of the physical evidence and everything that they have in their lockers over to the DA's office. And the DA now became the sole investigator, fully alleviating the police. I have another question. If, and we've read that the updates from the police as of 2024, if this were the case and one power moved, or one agency moved all of their physical evidence to the other agency, how then would the agency that moved it, say agency 1 or agency A, who moved it to agency B, how would they still be investigating the case, and with what? This was in 2008. Why is that important? It's important because if the case was moved to the DA's office and they have full control to test the DNA as he is suggesting via the evidence, then that would mean that there are no dual copies of the evidence, because all of the evidence that can be tested is in the hands of the DA. Some 1,000 pieces of evidence. But yet in 2024, John is still talking to the police, asking for the police to give him updates and asking the police to test the DNA. I'm confused, John. Here you are implying, and this is what I'm saying. What point am I getting at? The point that I'm getting at is there is a circulation of just talking. I'm just on television. We can clearly point to a time where John is just on television, on Oprah, the biggest stage, just talking. No clear understanding of the checks and balances, just talking. I'm trying to understand, or try to see what I can liken it to. It's like a person being briefed on something prior to going on air. I think I understand it, but I don't. Thought I did, but apparently I don't. That's what's going on right now. John has talked to somebody about some touch DNA, or maybe he's talked to the police or whoever. I'd be interested to know who told him that the DA tested the DNA. Because as we have shown in our video with DA Special Prosecutor Michael Caine back in 2000, what was going on, and I show that video to show that what was going on in the room and what was being said in the room can definitely be quite different than what is being expressed out in the news. That is very possible. So Michael Caine showed us that it is very possible for Lynn Wood to lead his troops of Patsy Ramsey and John Ramsey out the front door to act important and act like something had been accomplished, and straight lie and tell the people that they got where they wanted to get and something had been accomplished, when in reality, as we saw on the rare footage video, the compilation that we looked at, they didn't accomplish anything. And in fact, from one attorney to the next to another, Michael Caine called Lynn Wood an obstructionist. And he said, you're going to go out there and you're going to tell the people that, this went smoothly, this was great, and I'm going to go out there and tell them what really happened. Yeah, so we have precedent to say that what somebody may have told John behind closed doors can easily be morphed into something that is quite different. It's like that. It's like that game that they say you whisper in somebody's ear to start, and then they whisper in somebody's ear, and then they whisper in somebody's ear, and by the time you get to the end, what was said in the beginning is radically different for some reason or another than what the game was started with. And this is what's happening on national television, and Oprah doesn't even know it. The people sitting in the audience who can't fact check him don't even know that John is really just talking off the cuff right now. He knows a little something about touch DNA, but he doesn't explain a lot to you. His explanation is very vague. If you can understand that, doesn't tell you a lot about the process. That's okay. He doesn't have to, but he misleads you by telling you that, and he doesn't even believe that, the case has moved over and all of the evidence has been moved. Now, we did talk about how he asked for physical evidence and some of the evidence was turned over out of, despite normal precedent, was given to the Ramseys, things like the ransom note and stuff like that, so they could review it. They didn't need it, but so they can review it. But I think really his lawyers needed it at the time, so they could lay eyes and try to get a sense of what they needed. So, and what, or how they needed to revise their strategy. But anyways, the point is, John is misrepresenting the checks and balances in that the DA, and as we show, and as has been reinforced, I did a video on Mark Beckner and Chief Stan, or not, DA Stan Garrett. I think it's Garrett or Garnett, but he was the new DA. I can't remember the year, but anyways, they came in and they talked about working together. They talk about working together because the police collect the evidence and they keep the evidence and they house the evidence. And then, as Steve Thomas told us, they do a presentation, and they did a presentation, I think around 1998. They did a presentation in the summer of 1998, like 2-day presentation to the DA's office to say, here's all the evidence that we have and what we believe that how you should move forward with the case. So, and he's saying that they took it recently. That's not true. DA obtained the physical evidence, and DA tested the evidence. So now the insinuation that the DNA had not been touched prior is very misleading. We have here, as we looked at before, the police report, or the police updates, I'm sorry. And if I can look and see, this is the 13th. Okay. Ramsey case news release number 28, expert prosecution task force is formed February 13th of 1997. That's extremely early on in the case. Down here we have Chief Tom Colby also stated, we have received the results of some evidence in this case, specifically the testing on the DNA evidence has been completed by the CBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigations. We will now send the DNA samples to Cellmark Laboratories for additional testing. Tests could take 4 to 6 weeks. So that's one point in which prior to 2008 that they're testing the DNA. So when John is trying to insinuate that the DNA sat there in these people's hands until 2008, that's not true. The police are telling you right here in 1997, in February of 1997, even a little over a month and a half, maybe a little over like a month and a half, that we're already testing the DNA with the techniques that we have. That's what we're going to tell you right now. And that's what Chief Kobe is coming out and saying. Now, the March 6th update, and this is March 6th of 1997, various items in the case have been sent to Cellmark Diagnostics in Maryland for DNA testing. The items were delivered on Tuesday, February 28th. The testing by Cellmark could take up to 6 weeks for results. So here again, the police are telling you, hey, moving from February the 13th now to March the 6th, in the very next month, we're talking about sending DNA to Maryland for additional testing. And when it's been sent, sometimes when it's been received, and how long it's going to take. Right? So this idea that this information or this physical evidence set on the police desk without being touched, without being looked at, without being considered is nonsense. And I have some more that I want to look at, so I'll pull that up. Furthermore, this is the interview that Patsy did in 1998. I think this was June 23rd of 1998. Page 317 of this. This is closer to the end of the interview. So let me scroll back up just to make sure we're on the same page. Interview with Patsy Ramsey, June 23rd of 1998. Okay. And so essentially, I'm trying to figure out who Ellis Armstead is. I think he had something to do. I think he's like an attorney of some sort. I think he's Patsy's attorney, but he also had something to do with Burke's security team when Burke was going to school, and Patsy was, she had mentioned that she was concerned for Burke's safety, and John and Patsy were concerned for Burke's safety. So they set up a Burke watch, essentially, is what I think they started calling it. And Ellis Armstead was kind of part of that. But anyways, I think he's the Ramsey attorney, and he's kind of saying, let me ask one as a starter, and then we'll find out how the questions are really going to answer. Would you tell me the results of the DNA testing? Tom Haney, I think, is asking the question, says, I would if I could, but I don't know. Ellis Armstead says, why don't you ask a couple of questions? Then we will discuss it. Blah, blah, blah. Tom Haney says, so we can discuss it and decide whether we can tell you. Ellis Armstead says, they are all evidentiary questions of that sort of nature. I want to know about the DNA. I want to know more about the Whites. I want to know more about the McReynolds. We want to know we want to know questions. I want to ask questions along those lines, and I have a series of them, and I have a long list of them on a piece of paper. And so Tom Haney's like, can you give me an example? So basically, what we're doing here is we're talking about the results of DNA testing, right? This DNA, John said, and because Oprah said, what's the difference in the DNA? And John said, there's no difference. They just, found a way to test it better. And so right here, the cops are saying, like, we've been from 1997 and 1998. We've got the results of the DNA. We're not going to tell you now. John did say that. He said they got the results of the DNA and they knew they could rule us out, but they wouldn't tell us. I have not found that statement at all. But what we have here is that Tom Haney is seeming to suggest that they have the results of the DNA, and they're starting to ask questions as a result of what they know for the DNA. Okay. Okay, jumping forward a little bit, we have Patsy's interview, August 28th of 2000, looking at some stuff on the DNA. She's asking here about potential. She's being asked about potential suspects and in your mind, what made certain people suspects. And she goes on down. And she says, the handwriting has been thoroughly checked. DNA has been checked, et cetera, et cetera. But she moves down here, and Mr. Levin, who is part of the DA team, he's asking questions. He says, given, and I want to answer your question, I'm going to try to answer your question before I phrase it to your client. And here is Lynn Wood is involved in this discussion. And he says, I want to answer your question before I phrase it to your client. Given the status of the fiber analysis, the state of the art, that fiber is identical in all aspects to fibers from your client's coat. However, as is the case with any type of scientific evidence, even DNA evidence, where you get numbers that say, for example, the likelihood of a random match would be, say, 1 in 14 trillion. An expert is not going to get up. They'll talk about numbers, but they're not going to get up and say that this is the DNA from that man. And Lynn Wood says, maybe you should give us the numbers on this fiber. And Levin says there are no numbers. And Lynn Wood says, give us anything that you got and we'll take a look at it. And Mr. Levin has to kind of ask, do you understand what I'm talking about? Y'all are walking in these interviews. John and Patsy and Lynn Wood are walking in these interviews, like not comprehending what people are telling them. That's what's happening. Like John is sitting in the Oprah sit down, the Oprah interview, and he's just saying stuff. And it's, as I understand, touch DNA. And it's like, do you understand what we're talking about before you go on television and start talking about touch DNA and how you've been exonerated and all such as that? Do you understand what's happening? Because you're saying that the DNA has been there all along, and there are huge pushbacks to the DNA from 9 News. That's what I'm saying. So anyways, but you guys don't seem to fully and thoroughly grasp what people are telling you when they mention things like the DNA, when they mention things like forensic analysis. So Mr. Levin says, do you understand what I'm saying? I don't want to mislead you, because scientific evidence is always subject to, and then basically what Lynn Wood is saying is that, that science could be trash because one scientist could say this and then another scientist can come say that, is essentially what he's saying. And so Chief Beckner comes in and says, let me try to offer a compromise. Lynn Wood says, we're ready to hear it. Now, if you have some time to ever go through these transcripts, I'm telling you, man, the ones with Lynn Wood, if you thought John could frustrate you, let me tell you something. You are in for a real treat, because Lynn Wood gives John a run for his money. Yeah, he really does. He really gives John a run for his money. I mean, the nonsense that Lynn Wood often talks about and the ways in which he gets in the middle of stuff, not to even legally help his client, but to just talk about nonsense. And it's like, Lynn, I'm just asking basic questions. Be quiet. Get out of the way. It's like a small annoying bark that while you're trying to talk on the phone with your friend for no reason at all, your dog is just in the background, like consistently. Shut up, please. So Chief Beckner says instead, we're getting into semantics now. Like we have to figure out how we want to word this to make you feel good. And so Chief Beckner says, instead of wording that question in terms of fibers from the jacket or appear to be from the jacket, maybe if you worded fibers that by scientific analysis are identical to fibers from the jacket, and not say not identify those fibers from the jacket, but say identical fibers, right? Okay, so Chief Beckner is trying to offer a compromise. Lynn Wood says, what if we left out the fiber problem altogether and just simply ask her whether or not she ever had the jacket, the red and black gray jacket, in proximity of the paint tray? We don't have to fight the question of what the fiber is or isn't. Isn't that what you really want to find out? Chief Beckner says, well, I think that is probably what Bruce and Mike were trying to get to. Is there an explanation? And Linwood says, well, but again, I'm not trying to prevent there from being an explanation as to the question of the jacket in proximity to the paint tray, but I'm very much concerned about her trying to explain something that may or may not be the case scientifically based on opinion. Mr. Levin says, I'll rephrase the question and maybe this will satisfy you. He says, Ms. Ramsey, I have scientific evidence from forensic scientists that say that there's fibers in the paint tray that match your red jacket. I have no evidence from any scientists to suggest those fibers are from any other source than your red jacket. And then Linwood says, well, you can't. Come on. What other sources did they test? As I understand it, on the surface of this, it would seem like the question makes sense. On the surface of it. Well, have you tested any other sources? If I understand forensic testing with some of the literature that I went through correctly, we're not here to, and this, you got to pay attention, because people will say anything without digging into anything. And that is Linwood's job, to just throw stuff out there. Not backed up by anything. Just saying it, seeing if it sticks. The point of forensic testing is not to go out and test the world. Oh, what if it, because people will be like, oh, what if it was the neighbors? You don't know if the neighbor walked through their house with a red jacket. We're talking about things specific to the crime scene. That is the framework of forensic analysis. Things within the crime scene and things that pertain to the person of interest. If you are not a person of interest and you do not pertain to the crime scene, I'm not going across the street to the neighbor's house to test anything just because you tell me to. That person across the street is not a person of interest. If you give them to me as a person of interest and you say you should go talk to them, and I determine these people were asleep in bed at 11 p.m. at night, they had nothing to do with it, then guess what? I'm not going to go dig through their closet and say, give me every red shirt or red jacket that you find, because we have been able to effectively rule them out. As I understand it, that is the basic framework of forensic testing. So when Linwood is essentially saying, man, go test the world over, go test every red thing you can find, then come back to me. That's not how it works. So again, Lynn, I have to ask you, do you understand what I'm talking about? Do you understand what I'm saying? Anyways, Mr. Levin goes on to say, well, I told you, in the question, and I told you face to face that given the most sophisticated testing available at this time, there is fiber evidence in that paint tray, that matches. And he's getting ready to say Patsy. And so we are trying to build a case here. And this is the DA. This is not even Boulder police anymore, right? Chief Beckner is there, yes. But this is not Boulder police in the line of questioning. This is Mr. Levin from the DA's office, as I understand it. He's working under Alex Hunter. And they're saying, I think we're getting to the point to where we've done some forensic testing. And the forensic testing seems to focus on you. Can you help me understand why that would be the case? And this is where Linwood gets to working. This is where he gets to start jumping in front. Well, you can't say this. That's not evidence. Just claiming some other stuff. And then he goes on to say, then fairly, we would like to see that evidence so we can let her answer fairly. And basically, he goes on to say, in the act of all fairness, let us see the evidence. But I was trying to research a little bit on that. And you cannot withhold information or evidence that might sort of exonerate the client. You can't withhold that. That's illegal. Um, and you've probably seen a couple times where John is responding to that and saying, yeah, they withheld evidence from us. They didn't let us know this, that, and the third. But I think, and I could be wrong, still trying to flesh this out, but I think that, just in interviews and pre-trial, um, not in the discovery phase, but prior to that, when you're just doing interviews and you're trying to just do investigative discovery, essentially, like we're just trying to figure out what's what, who's who, where is where, what goes where, kind of deal. The police don't have to disclose that to you in that sort of, and I'll call it like a pretrial period. I guess there are some cases in which even in the pretrial period, and I'm not a lawyer, but in some cases in the pretrial period where disclosures have to happen of some sort of information in the way that Linwood is asking. But I think specifically in this context, they do not owe Linwood or Patsy or John the opportunity to see the testing results for the forensics and for the DNA, right? So even though John has come on and told us in 2008 that nothing's been done, things have just been sitting on the desk of the Boulder Police Department, we can see here that they've had conversation. I'm not done yet. Hold on. I'm not done yet. Let me go to this next one. Here we have John's August 29th, 2000 interview. And I don't think they mention anything about DNA specifically in here, but they do mention a couple things about forensic testing. And I'll start right here. If I need to jump around and go back, then I will. But Mr. Levin says, Mr. Ramsey, it is our belief that based on forensic evidence that there are, hold on, man. I can't. I can't give y'all that yet. I can't give y'all that yet. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, okay. Let me make sure we're looking at the right thing. Okay. So the precursor to this entire discussion, Lynn Wood says he's kind of going off, and I think Patsy was interviewed first, but now it's John's turn to be interviewed. And so Lynn Wood is coming in here and he says, I think the position they talked about, prior. So Mr. Levin says, I've got some questions for Mr. Ramsey that deal with the fiber evidence. Mike, do you have other questions while your computer's on me? Mr. Kane says no. Mr. Levin says, I have some questions for Mr. Ramsey that deal with the fiber evidence, and this is probably going to be questions that your lawyer is going to advise you not to answer, but I'd like to pose them anyway. So I already know Lynn Wood is probably going to get in my way. Okay, but I'm going to ask him anyway. Mr. Wood says, is this what we discussed yesterday with Patsy? Mr. Levin says, different fibers. I'm not going to discuss Patsy's fibers. I'm going to discuss different fibers. See. There's been some information that's been turned over to the DA, probably by the police. So when John jumps on Oprah and he starts talking about, the DA had hold of it. No, that's not how it works. Separation of power there. So Mr. Wood says, I think the position is to save time. Basically, don't ask me nothing about these fibers. Okay, you're going to try to stonewall me already. Mr. Ramsey, if you want to question Mr. Ramsey about test results, it's absolutely fair that we be allowed to see the results ourselves before we answer questions, that we are not dealing with speculation and hypotheticals that are not supported by the facts as you might represent them. Now, the problem and the thing in which the police had already said in the police updates, as we've shown before, we're probably not going to give you that evidence until we go to trial. They didn't say they would never give it to you. They said when we go to trial, we will probably give you that evidence. Why? Because, as I was kind of reading through, why would they do that? Because we're trying to protect the integrity of the investigation. We do not want you getting information and then reading off of what we say and what we do and then coming up with an answer, which is exactly what Lynn Wood is suggesting that be done in so many terms, in so many words. basically says, we don't want to deal on hypotheticals. We want to see the results for ourselves before we answer questions so that we know that we're not dealing with the speculation supported by the facts as you might represent them. We couldn't get yesterday what I discern to be consistent response from any of you all about the test results that you discussed on the red fiber. That's a lie. There was no inconsistencies in what they were saying about the fiber. They told him that we found fiber in the paint tray that matches Patsy's jacket. And then Lynn launched into something about, oh, that's not, science. If we can't see it, it ain't real, is essentially what he says. There was no inconsistency in their response. It's just that they weren't going to show Lynn would. And so he said we couldn't get a consistent response from any of you about the test results that you discussed on the red fiber. That just tells me that to try to get into the area without being privy to the actual result is not something I'm comfortable with in terms of fundamental fairness. And this fundamental fairness, I don't believe is anything legally binding. It's not legally binding. Like fundamental fairness, this is kind of a strategy. I'll just go ahead and say it. This is kind of a strategy of Hal Haddon, right? This is a strategy of Hal Haddon to talk about things like fundamental fairness, and maybe not in those terms, but quite different, but quite similarly, I should say, but using for different purposes, talking about the witnesses in the case that are not required to witness or speak to the defense prior to trial, right? They can speak to the prosecution, they can speak to the police prior to trial and give their statements, but they do not have to speak to the defense. But the way in which Hal Haddon runs the ship or steers the ship, he wants information from the witnesses that could potentially come against his client in John and Patsy Ramsey, or I think it's just John Ramsey, that could come against John Ramsey. And so he wants that information. But what he tries to do, as he talks about, I think in his oral history and some other related articles that he wrote, what he talks about in doing is, if I can't get the witness to come, speak with us, then what we will try to do and give us their side of the story in relation to my client, then we'll try to impeach the witness. And essentially what that means is, we're going to send you a letter saying that we want to talk to you. And we're essentially going to say it's unfair that you have something to say about my client, but you won't tell us what you have to say about our client so that we can, basically give us a chance to kind of answer objections or anything like that. It's unfair. That's not legally binding. That's just you begging for people to talk to you. Legally, those citizens or those witnesses don't have to talk to you. But what you then try to do is you try to go about establishing impeachment of the witness. That means that you try to find something, or you try to note something that would make the witness non-credible. Maybe there's something that the witness said prior to any statement in court. Maybe they said something on the news or something like that, and you went and found it and said, hey, they're saying this over here, but prior to this trial, but as we sit here in the trial, they're saying something completely different. This witness is not credible. Get him off the stand. That's the gist of a part of Hal Haddon's strategy to get rid of people who do not favor the client, is essential, and that's the way in which he's doing it. So Lynn Wood is kind of following the same pattern and talking about fundamental fairness, something that's not legally binding, but he wants it. He's got to argue for his client in that way. He says, so we are not comfortable with your characterizations of any test results forensically. We will consider at the appropriate time, if we get there, whether we will answer those questions if you will provide us with the actual result itself. So that's our position yesterday. That's our position today. That will be our position tomorrow. If you will give us the results, we're going to look at them and we will consider whether or not we can answer questions based on the results. So tell me what you have. Tell me what evidence you have, and I'll decide whether or not I can answer that question. If I can't answer that question, then I'm not going to answer the question. If I can answer the question, then I'm just going to throw something out there. But give me what you got, and then we'll talk about it. Now to the one that I wanted you guys to see. This is all. Mr. Levin says, all right. Anyways, they're having to talk around Lynn a lot. He says, thank you, Mr. Wood. I appreciate the opportunity. Lynn Wood says, thank you. Mr. Levin comes on and says, Mr. Ramsey, it is our belief, based on forensic evidence, that there are hairs that are associated, that the source is the collared black shirt that you sent us, that are found in your daughter's undergarments. And I wondered if you, and look at this. John screams bloody murder. John says, that's bull. I don't believe that. I don't believe it. I can't believe that. Consistent with his response in terms of the pineapple. I don't believe that. I can't believe that. I mean, I can't. You gotta I can't believe that. I don't remember asking you whether or not you could or would believe that, because Patsy said the same thing in her interview. When you ask them about something, they say, oh, I don't believe it. Whether the DNA would have tied you, whether there would have been numbers to say 1 in 1 trillion, you would have just simply responded, I don't believe it. That is not a legitimate answer to a question. I don't believe it. I don't care what you believe. That's what the data shows. I don't buy it. If you're trying to disgrace my relationship with my daughter, and then the question comes back, Mr. Ramsey, I'm not trying to disgrace, cuts him off again. Well, I don't believe it. I think you are. That's disgusting. Wait. John, give the man a chance to tell you sorry. I don't mean to imply. That's not what I'm trying to do. Oh, but in order to stop people from asking questions, here comes Lynn Wood. I think you, Mr. Levin says, I'm not. Mr. Wood says, yes, you are. Mr. Levin says, and the follow-up question would be, I'm trying to get back on track. Lynn Wood comes and says, posing the question in light of what I said to you yesterday is nothing more than an attempt to make a record that unfairly, unjustly, and in a disgusting fashion points what you might consider to be some finger of blame at this man regarding his daughter. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself for doing it, Bruce. You knew we weren't going to answer that question. Why don't you just give us the report and we'll put it there for someone to look at it and tell us what it says and see how fair and accurate you've been. Look, Lynn, I'm just trying to ask questions and get at the answers, but apparently you don't want me to do that. So I guess we just gonna have to move on.
Clothing that gave them enough to put in the database. What this new testing did was, and it's a kind of a new technology called touch DNA. They found more of the same DNA in other parts of her clothing, and so it just was overwhelmingly conclusive that this was indeed the killer's DNA.
Now y'all just saw Bruce Levin back in back in 2000, 8 years prior, say, man, it looks like based on forensic testing, because John is talking about it in JonBenét's clothing. Bruce Levin said, hey, the DA's office said, hey, based on forensic testing, it looks like your clothing fibers were found in her under. That's disgusting. No, I won't believe it. From then on, I would have marked that down and been like, okay, we need to go rerun tests on that, and we need to get confirmation, because that's where you begin to build the case at that point. He said no, he's denied it. Build the case right there. Police oftentimes let you sort of, I give you a rope and I let you walk out from there and do it to yourself. Because if you're telling me that it's not the case, so I got Patsy with fibers in the paint in the paint tray, she's denying it. I got John with fibers in JonBenét's undergarments, he's denying it. But I got the forensics to prove it. I'm going to take these and I'm going to set them to the side. Period. I got a bowl sitting on the table with Burke's fingerprints. I'm going to take this and set it to the side, because now we can start to circulate and triangulate around who was where doing what and try to figure out when, because the forensics show, given the reasonable conclusion, as we will present to a judge, given the reasonable conclusion, the forensics show that Patsy's coat was in this paint tray. The paint tray was found downstairs where the body was presumably found. So in the crime scene, in the area of the crime, John also had a black shirt that was found at the crime scene, according to what the police are saying. So we can start setting these things in terms of not just circumstantial evidence, but we can start taking these pieces of evidence and working inward and driving inward. That's what I would do.
This is part of the letter that Mary Lacy, the Boulder district attorney, wrote to John Ramsey. To the extent that we may have contributed in any way to the public perception that you might have been involved in this crime, she said, I'm deeply sorry. No innocent person should have to endure such an extensive trial in the court of public opinion. Mm-hmm. Did it ever go away, the trial in the court of public opinion?
Well, it did to some degree, in that the ironic thing through this whole ordeal was people were wonderful to us. You know, people say, well, how is it to be out in public? It was just wonderful, because individual people were wonderful to us. Mm-hmm. Of course, the media was cruel, and that portrayed the image that everybody was cruel if they weren't.
Yeah, and the media was cruel in that what? What do you want to say about that?
Well, it was a rush to judgment, almost a cyberspace lynching, I guess, would be a way to look at it. I got a lot of letters eventually from people that said, please forgive me that I...
How was there a rush to judgment when y'all went on television on January the 1st? Then people started asking questions based off of, they kept asking when we saw the 97 police press conference with Leslie Ahome, we saw the 97 police conference January 7th of 1997, like 5 or 6 days or something like that, after the CNN interview, several in like 5 or 6, 7 days, something like that, after JonBenét's actual funeral, where the reporters are asking, have you ruled out the Ramseys just yet? We don't know, because what it seems like is that you're keeping the Ramseys in and under the umbrella of investigation. Let us know what's going on with that. And Leslie was like, I can't really tell y'all too much. Nobody's being ruled out. Like, that's just where we are. That's what people were asking. They were trying to get at and say, okay, if you're not ruling them out, does that indicate that you think they did it? That's all they were asking. And that's okay to ask. But it's not like the media just overwhelmingly attacked you. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm doing this analysis, because John will make it seem like there was an onslaught from the very beginning, that there was an onslaught of news reporters just raining down on them and just bearing down on them and acting like, you know, they were, and the news was pointing, you did it, you, nobody else, don't look at, and basically the same thing for the police. We don't find that. That's not true.
I thought you were guilty, and I would write back and say, how could you have thought anything else based on what you were told? So certainly I forgive you.
Do you forgive the media?
Well, I do, because you can't hold anger. Yeah. And, you know, there's certainly, what we learned was they're certainly a very responsible part of the media, and there's certainly a very irresponsible part of the media, a very reckless part.
Weren't you upset, though? I'd read that you were upset or heard that you were upset that even responsible media were quoting tabloids.
Well, that was an issue. One day I picked up a USA Today, and on the front page there was an article that said it was reported that in the Globe, which is a tabloid, such and such, about the Ramsey case. And I thought, holy mackerel, look what this is.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a reputable national media source quoting from a tabloid.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I'll say before moving to the next video. I think John actually did an interview with the National Enquirer. One of the ones that he went after. I think he actually did an interview with them. So if you're questioning the reputation of the source, we could pull it straight from John. And I was going down a Reddit forum that was also kind of talking about, hey, look, these tabloids may not necessarily. Now, I don't read the tabloids. I don't report on them. I've read them, but I don't report them just because I'm not comfortable with reporting on them, just because that's how I grew up. But it is what it is. But that's not to say that some of the information presented in the tabloids is not correct. Whether they took it and put their own spin on it is another thing. But whether the information that they obtained, is true is another. So I could have definitely obtained information, but what I said about it could have been, controversial. So let's go to the next video. Okay, here's the second video.
Do you regret that Patsy passed and never got to hear those words?
Well,
that you were
I'm
exonerated?
confident she knows kind of what's going on. And Patsy was a very strong person, very positive person. Anytime we traveled, she took a blue dress with her. And the blue dress was to, in case they found the killer, and if she was asked to be interviewed, she could wear her blue dress. And she did that for years, and then finally gave up hauling the blue dress around.
Really?
So, yeah.
Because she lived believing they were going to find the killer.
Yeah.
You must have suspicions about who the killer could be.
We believe they came in while we were out, waited for us to go to bed and sleep, and took JonBenét from her room. I've said always, I don't know anybody this evil, or I've not had anybody around me this evil. This was a horribly evil act that I know of. We were in a relatively small town.
Without going to the transcripts, John and Patsy did both talk about Priscilla and Fleet White acting weird. And so that is when they said that they started to feel like that Fleet and Priscilla could be suspects. In some cases, they didn't want to commit to that, but they were essentially kind of saying, they were acting kind of weird. And I thought, hey, why are you acting weird? Could you be a suspect? So trying to say, or trying to, sort of insinuate or state that in some way or some form that we didn't think it was anybody close to us. We didn't think anybody close to us hated us that much. But then, and this is in '08, but then, at the very beginning, even in 2000 and stuff like that, you're sort of throwing, and prior to, you're throwing you're throwing Fleet White and Priscilla White under the bus because y'all seem to have some sort of disagreement is what's happening. So it's like, that's not true that you didn't think it was anybody, like, oh, we didn't know anybody that hated us. I mean, it seems like you felt like there was somebody there that hated you. That's
we had a relatively large business, so we were fairly visible. So I don't know.
Did you feel that the police in any way bungled this whole thing?
Oh yeah, I don't know how to say that in a polite way, but they were inexperienced, had a lot of arrogance, and that's a very dangerous combination. And
we don't have evidence that the police were arrogant. We don't have that. Number one. Number two, as we saw in videos about the police updates, Chief Beckner and on down the line of the investigative team with Steve Thomas listed the qualifications of these individuals. And we looked at this before, but just to be clear, police, Boulder police, and this was released, you know what I mean? They're talking about wanting to re-interview people, and they're talking about the task list that they had, the things that they needed to do. So being very thorough. This was released on December 5th of 1997. This was released on December 5th of 1997, and they're already coming up with a task list and things that they need to do. We need to re-interview some significant witnesses. We need to get additional forensic consulting. There goes that DNA that we talked about. We have reviewed close to 200 video tapes taken from the Ramsey home. Some things that we need to do. We need to re-interview some other people, some witnesses and neighbors, because John and Patsy were trying to say that y'all didn't go talk to no neighbors. Y'all didn't go talk to anybody. Y'all just came and talked to us. Here in 1997, the police are saying we need to re-interview other identified significant witnesses and neighbors. We need to, the collection of tasks yet to be completed, the collection of additional and analysis of additional evidentiary items, completion of all forensic testing. One of the most important things, as we have listed here, is we need to talk to the Ramsey family, the immediate Ramsey family, Mr. and Miss Ramsey, and their son Burke. But the point that I'm trying to get to, in December of 1997, police investigators assigned to the case, Commander Beckner, 41 years old. He's not a, he ain't brand new. He served with the Boulder Police Department for 19 and a half years, nearly 20 years. He's been floating around the police department. So he was there. All 15 cases that they solved from 1990 to 19, or I'm sorry, the 13 of the 15 cases at 85% that they solved from 1990 to 1995, he was there. Detective Sergeant Tom Wickman, 44, served with the Boulder PD for 19 years. 19. Okay, at what point are these guys no longer amateurs? You got two guys with 19, dang near 20 years of experience, dang near 40 years of combined experience right here in Boulder, specifically in Boulder. Tom Trujillo been with the department. So let's tally this. I got 19 and a half plus 19 plus 12. That's 50 years of combined experience. Detective Thomas has been with the department specifically. He's been in law enforcement for 12 years. Been with BPD for 7. I'm sorry. How long does it take you? Okay, in 12 years, would you or would you not be looking for a managerial position most times? If you are going into a career-driven field and you are saying, okay, I have an opportunity to become, I start off as an analyst, then what's the next step in 2, 3, maybe 5 years? Senior manager, and then whatever's above that. And then what I'm trying to do in 7 to 8 years is become some sort of associate VP, and then, 10, 12 years, move up to VP, and maybe in wherever you are, I want to move up to COO or move somewhere that will give me an opportunity to become a COO and get into the C-suite. That's what you do. So after 12 years, this man knows what he's doing. And he's specifically been in Boulder for 7. Okay? Detective Harmer, she's been there for 11 years. Gosage has been in law enforcement for 10 years. So he's got some time, but he's been in Boulder for 5 years. He's been in Boulder essentially as long as John and Patsy Ramsey have been in Boulder. Steve Thomas has been in Boulder. He's an outsider, but he's been in Boulder. Steve Thomas came from Atlanta, I believe. Steve Thomas was in Boulder before John and Patsy Ramsey. Bruh. They know the lay of the land better than you do. Kim Stewart, 7.5 years BPD, specific BPD experience. Carrie Weinheimer, 11 years in law enforcement, 7.5 BPD. And Detective Michael Everett, 10 years. That is 98.5 years combined of experience in Boulder. That is experience in Boulder. You have people with almost 100 years worth of experience in Boulder. What does that mean? That combined experience in Boulder, what does that mean? That means Detective Weinheimer is going somewhere, like exploring different parts of Boulder, speaking to different people in Boulder, getting to know the community. Detective Everett is doing the same thing, right? Who knows? Detective Everett probably grew up here. Detective Stewart is doing the same thing. Ghostage is doing the same thing. Harmer. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 officers, detectives, agents of the law who have been going around and speaking to different people in the community and have been working specifically at Boulder Police Department, establishing rapport with the community. You have almost 100 years. If you round up, that's 99 years of experience in law enforcement as it pertains to Boulder. So when John says what he says, that they don't know what they're doing, it's a lie.
Dangerous combination. And so certainly they did.
And in the beginning, did you understand why you would be suspect?
Yeah, I did. I didn't. It didn't make sense.
Yes.
But I accepted it. And in fact, I told the police, I said, well, okay, investigate us, but for heaven's sakes, don't stop with us.
Yeah.
And of course they did. And that was the frustrating part.
And you say Patsy carried the blue.
Michael Caine said, if you would just allow us to get past you guys, then we would investigate some other people. And Michael Caine is not even in the BPD. Michael Caine was a special prosecutor for the for the DA's office, for the district attorney's office. Michael Caine said, if you would just answer our questions and allow us to move past you, we would do so.
Blue dress around. Blue because blue looks great on TV.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a great color to wear. That's why I thought a lot of people might not. Blue is the best.
Why would you be worried about looking good on TV? I don't care where I'm at or what I'm doing. If you catch me in a wife beater and saggy jeans with dirty shoes and paint stains on my pants and musty armpits. If y'all come up to me and tell me that y'all found the person who did this to my daughter, guess what? I'm going on television and I'm saying, thank God we found this person. I'm sorry for the way I look. But right now, I was at work or I was doing whatever. This is a momentous occasion. Thank you to the BPD. Thank you to the DA's office. Thank you to the community. Thank you to everyone that is involved. Thank God for my unwavering faith in God and in the higher being and higher. I thank everyone for helping us complete this journey. Now we need to just continue toward justice. I don't care what I'm wearing. So to be talking about this is the thing why people kind of get mad when they say, Patsy was smiling, and it's like, oh, you don't criticize her because she was smiling. But you guys kind of continue to do this weird stuff, man. Like I get it. You don't want people to be too critical of the Ramseys, but it's like y'all keep doing this stuff. You're coming out of a memorial service for your daughter, smiling. You're in a deposition talking about you got to get to a band for your daughter. Talking about you got to get to a band concert. You know what I mean? Like you're coming out of a interview with the police, talking about your daughter, where you just argued them down and didn't answer any questions, and you're smiling and chuckling. And now you're telling me that you're worried about how you look on TV. What?
color to wear for TV. So she was carrying the dress around in hopes that one day
we'd get a call.
That's right.
Yeah.
And was she able to go on with a life and have some meaning in her life?
Yes, she was. We realized pretty early on that we needed to get our life back to normal as best we could for the sake of our son, who at the time was 9.
9, yeah, Burke was 9.
And so that really became our focus, was trying to give Burke a normal life, normal childhood. And so that really gave us a focus.
Kate, what's your question?
John, you and your wife were judged so harshly for JonBenét's participation in beauty pageants. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you think that was a part of why public opinion turned on you so completely. Were people just primed to believe the worst already?
I think that partly was it. Yeah, I mean, that was not a big part of JonBenét's life. Patsy had a philosophy of letting her kids experience whatever they wanted to do. So JonBenét took violin lessons, piano lessons.
As somebody said in the Vanity Fair article, Missing Innocence by Anne Louise Bardock, Patsy was in denial, and by extension, John is in denial, to try to say that this is not a big part of JonBenét's life. When they would come down and they would do nail days, costumes would be made, they would do photo shoots, they would learn routines, they would learn songs. So this is not just, a Sunday afternoon stroll in the park that you do every now and again. This is something that you dedicate a lot of time to.
Rock climbing lessons. They wanted to try it, and JonBenét wanted to try that, and she was an extreme extrovert, and she loved to sing. And
was there any video of the violin, rock climbing, and all those things?
See, we didn't even take the video of the pageants.
Okay.
That was taken by the pageant producer.
As I was saying, if we had seen video of rock climbing, ballet, soccer, all the things that people consider normal.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there would have been a different perception.
Perhaps, but that obviously wasn't that. It wasn't out there, and the actual video was not ours either. But
back to her question, do you think that hurt?
Oh, I think it did. I mean, that's I guess a Southern thing to some degree, and Patsy was in the Miss America pageant, and JonBenét liked that, and she had Patsy's genes. I mean, she was ta-da, here I am, and so it was a natural thing for her to enjoy, and. Of course, Patsy was criticized for dragging her into these things, and that was quite the opposite. She didn't at all. But Patsy also was someone who, if you're going to do it, let's do it right. Mm-hmm. And they did. But they just had fun with it.
But I noticed when the tape was running here, as we were preparing to go on the air here, that you would look at the tape, but every time the picture of JonBenét would come up, you would look away.
Well,
are you able to have it in a place?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have pictures on my dresser. I guess what bothers me is the reference to her as a beauty queen, because that's not what she was. She was a 6-year-old little girl that loved to do lots of different things, including get dirty, and it became a tagline that all media attaches to her name now, which I just don't think is a fair representation of who she really was.
Well, she had a full 6-year-old's life.
She did. Yeah, she did. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a real answer, personally. I don't think that's a real answer. It's not. Let me tell you why. Because I'm asking you why you're turning your face away from your daughter. If you have pictures of your daughter, why are you looking down and looking away? That's essentially like if everybody in the room is watching, a slideshow, but I look over at you and you're the only person not watching the slideshow, and your response is, well, I don't believe that, it's characterizing her in a beauty pageant way. You can still watch the slideshow. Why completely detest the image of your daughter just because you feel like she's being misrepresented in terms of pageantry? Like, that's just you could still look at your daughter and admire her beauty and admire her wit and admire everything that she was and the culmination of who she was in that slideshow, and say, man, and I do want to clear after the slideshow, because that's what you're here for, to clear up misconceptions about you in the news. And that's what when Oprah asked you about, what you wanted to say to the news, you could have said, oh, and I do want to clear up one misconception. Or even if you didn't remember it then, you remember it now when Oprah specifically asked you about it directly, you could have said, oh, and one thing I do want to clear up, the news, and I don't fault anybody, but you guys continue to show, JonBenét in this light. And JonBenét was so much more than that. If I had so many pictures that I could show you that JonBenét was doing this and that would have been the point of clarification. And you don't need to look down and not acknowledge your daughter on screen to do that. I believe that you're looking down and not acknowledging your daughter on screen to do that, because when you look down, you don't want to acknowledge what's in front of you. You're trying to shield yourself from hurt. You're trying to shield yourself from pain. In this moment, you're thinking. It's almost like a position of shame. Whether you did anything or not, you think to yourself, I'm sorry I failed you. That's okay to say. Just say that. Babe, I failed you. I cannot. Anything that I'm about to say next, it's possible that I'm here to say some things that might be controversial, because now we have to start thinking about, if we think about the press conference, when I think they asked Patsy, would JonBenét sort of be proud of you? Do you think that, JonBenét would like this or what have you? Where the response from Patsy was, I want JonBenét to be proud of me and know that, we're still trying to find her killer and stuff like that. And I think the Ramseys do a lot of soothing with this idea that JonBenét is looking down on me or Patsy is looking down on me, appreciating this. So I don't buy that personally, but it doesn't matter. But anyways, let me know what you think thus far. Like, share, subscribe, and until next video, take care of yourself. Take it easy.